plateaus feel like the end, but they're usually just the midpoint. And I'm a case example. I actually started out at 500, my diagnostic, and then I went to 508, and I stayed at 508 for like 3 full-length exams. And then I went to 512, 515. I stayed there for 4 exams or 3 exams. And then I went to 520 and around there and kept scoring there. At those moments, yes, it was hard to be like, this is the end. I'm just going to score this on the test. But literally, it was my midpoint. I guess there was like 2 of my midpoints. Most students who end up scoring 510, 515 plus spend a chunk of time around a plateau, around 500, around 507, around 510, 513, whatever. It's the part where your brain is like reorganizing what you've learned. You're not failing, like you're just consolidating. You're just consolidating what you've learned.
Welcome back to Pursuit of Practice. If you're studying for the MCAT right now, you already know it can be completely overwhelming. You might be stuck scoring lower than you expected on your practice exams, or you've taken tests and didn't get the results you hoped for. If that's where you are not alone. So many students hit plateaus, feel discouraged, or start doubting whether they're even capable of getting the score that they need. And today's episode is all about changing that narrative. We are going to talk about ways to go from feeling stuck to seeing real improvements, what shifts in strategy, mindset, and habits can take someone from a score that they are unhappy with to one that they are happy with. Whether you're early in your prep or deep in the weeds, this conversation is going to give you something that you can use right away. Our guest this week has been where you are right now. Ante is an MCAT instructor, tutor, and coach for Blueprint and has been here for almost a year. He is a current MS applicant in the Canadian medical school system, so greetings from south, I guess, because you're north to us. Ante has been tutoring since 2021 and has a particular passion for helping students excel in complex subjects like anatomy and physiology, and he believes that making learning engaging and tailored to individual needs is the key to success. Ante is a diligent and driven student at McMaster University, co-founding both Bridge Builders Mentorship and the Undergraduate Research Institute for Knowledge Translation, where he helps his peers develop research skills and communicate complex ideas to the general public. Outside of his academic pursuits, Ante volunteers as a peer support facilitator and enjoys hiking, playing with his dogs, and experimenting with new recipes. He's been described, and I personally experienced because I've had the pleasure of teaching with him before, that he is witty, kind, considerate, and dedicated to everyone he supports and what he puts his mind to. Ante plans to pursue a career in medicine, continuing to merge his passion for education with his commitment to healthcare advocacy. Ante, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. That was a great introduction. I don't think I've ever been as well formally introduced ever. So that's great. That was awesome.
Well, thank you. Okay, yeah. So let's dive right into it. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is where a lot of people are probably right now if they're seeking this episode out, right? So what mistakes do you see most often from students who feel stuck if they're around that 500 mark, even below that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I have like a lot of thoughts for this. I think the number one thing that I see a lot, I'm also a coach too. So I have like meetings with individual students, like one-on-one, students in my class, tutoring students. I think the number one thing I see is thinking that being stuck at whatever like the 500 mark is or whatever their plateau is, represents like their overall like skill or capabilities. I think there's kind of like a notion that like, if I'm at 500 right now, I'm going to be at 500 for the rest of my journey, and I'm going to get 500 on my test day. And I completely understand where they're coming from. I feel like I had like those thoughts too. It's kind of like those like fears of being a pre-med where you're like, I don't want to get this score, and I'm like catastrophizing. I think that I will get this score because I'm getting it right now. And that's a mistake, right? Students keep thinking that like, oh, this score will represent your overall skills and capabilities, but it doesn't, right? Like a score is just a score. And I think like, as we kind of like discuss like later on in this episode, like it's really more than that. Like your MCAT journey should represent like a growth mindset that you're going to continue to keep growing and learning, especially like navigating, like, you know, how you want to study, how you study best for the MCAT. It's really more than that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so it sounds like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. I was going to say like also too, like another mistake I see a lot in students is, seeing like content. Oh my gosh. Seeing content as like the only way to improve. So I think like people just read a lot of like Reddit and like SDN. SDN is not a thing in Canada, but like it's so funny. Like I think a lot of American students like read Student Doctor Network or whatever, and so I had to learn about it as like an instructor. And like I go on it and I'm like, oh, like I'm doing this to help my students understand what they're looking at. And I'm like, this is so toxic. Like, it's actually crazy how like every single person is like, you have to do this content phase, like this practice phase. And like, you're only scoring 500 and not improving because you don't know the organic reactions or whatever. Like, I think like students like get like internalized notions that like, oh, like I only have to improve my content to do better. Like I'm only scoring 500 because I'm scoring 50th percentile, which is 500, because I don't know 50% of the content, or I do know 50% of the content only. And that's not true, right? Like the MCAT, as like I'm sure you've experienced, Pooja, is more of a test of critical thinking rather than content. Content is not what the MCAT is actually about. That's why like also if you're a Blueprint student, you have heard from your instructors that you want to get through modules, aka content, as fast as possible because it's really only the first pass at content, and really it's practicing like actually seeing the content and applying your knowledge to do better. So like the whole thing about like, oh, like content is the only way to improve. It really isn't. Sure. Yes. You have to know metabolic pathways and you have to know your amino acids, and like, yeah, you want to improve that as well. But, actually knowing how you're going to be when you actually do a practice question, like the mindset, your pacing, how you apply your strategies is way more helpful to actually learn than it is just like memorizing, like sitting down and memorizing pathways.
Right.
Yeah, that's like a big thing there that I notice.
So I guess from your perspective, as someone who's not only taken this test, not only taught, but also coached people, how important would you say mindset is in the early stages of studying compared to what we've talked about, how SDN likes to talk about, people in SDN like to talk about pure content review? How would you weigh, I guess, early stage mindset versus content review?
I think like I would love to say that mindset is like everything. It isn't, because like you have to know content, like you have to know your amino acids. Like, that's the thing that always comes to mind. Like you have to know like general metabolic path. Not saying you have to know like every step, but you have to know generally the metabolic pathways, all that kind of stuff. But the ratio, I guess like the thing that's going to serve you the most down the line is mindset. And I'll give an example of my own personal experiences. I was a Blueprint student. I was a live online Blueprint student. And I very much enter the MindCat with like the Reddit mindset of like, let me like go through all these modules, like learn and memorize like as much as possible. Like I studied every day. I studied for 7 days. Like also, I didn't take a break day. I would study like 8 to 10 hours a day. Like I grinded. And then 6 weeks later, I was burned out and I had to take a week off because I was so exhausted. And I basically like in that week, I was just like, oh, like, let me just do some practice questions to still feel like I'm doing something. And I scored worse than what I did when I scored worse than my diagnostic. I also scored worse than before I even learned the content. I think that's a great example, although anecdotal. But I've seen it so many times with my students. Content only takes you so far. It's kind of like content is the stuff in your brain, but mindset is how you use your brain, right? Like mindset is like how you actually use the brain, like use the content in your brain to actually get stuff right. So if you like just focus on the content your entire time, that might work for some people. It probably won't work for a lot, right? Because it's really important to stress a mindset on like growth and viewing the MCAT as like an opportunity to keep learning. And I think one thing I always comes to mind is like trying to find the joy in part of studying for the MCAT. Like, you know, typically if you're studying for the MCAT, you want to be a doctor, you're probably like a nerd or a geek in like some facet of your life. Like you enjoy science to like some degree. And I think like as a pre-med or in college, it kind of gets like beaten out of you. Like you're kind of just like, get those grades, like get that research, get that volunteering, like get X, Y, and Z to like make you stand out as an applicant or whatever. And I get it. Like I get it. I'm also an MMS school applicant. I understand like the whole like chase and all that kind of stuff. But the MCAT is a months long study process with only one result. It's not like a course where it's like you have continuous assignments and tests and you keep having to push yourself. It's not like volunteering and research where you have like to keep like so many deadlines and things to like kind of prove yourself to.
Yeah.
That's what I found a lot of personal joy in studying for the MCAT, is that you now have time to like review things that maybe weren't interesting because you were so stressed about your grades, but now are. Like, I hated biochem in college because my professor was horrible and we had like tests every week. I loved biochem in MCAT setting because it was like actually interesting to be like, oh, this is like how glucose actually gets converted to pyruvate. Like, I understand why these steps are rate limiting because I have to use ATP, and like, oh, like watch this like cool YouTube video on like this process and seeing like how the molecules change, like stuff like that where you're like, oh, I get to be a nerd again and I actually enjoy it and not be like so stressed because like in an hour I have to like go do this research project and like, and then after that I have to like, you know, do other stuff. Like, yeah, some students might be like balancing all that kind of stuff while studying for the MCAT. I think treating that time dedicated to the MCAT as just that, as just like a time that you can connect to your nerdy side. You can like try to like again to like learn new things. I think is really helpful. Kind of like approaching it with like a mindset of like, geek out, like try to, you know, connect to like the stuff that maybe you've never heard about. Like, I never did psych soc and I found it so interesting. I scored the highest in because it's just so fascinating. I never took a course on it. It was really interesting. And that interest, like that, like wanting to like learn more about something and like actually see how it's expressed in like passages and questions.
Yeah.
You do better, right? Like it's a classic thing. Like you're gonna do better on things you enjoy. Like it's like a life saying. It also applies to the MCAT. Who knew?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like, I guess like my final answer would be like finding the joy in part of the MCAT to whatever degree. And also kind of like combining that like growth mindset with also recognizing that like your well-being is important. Content only takes you so far, right? Because you're just shoving stuff in your brain. The mindset element of like taking breaks and recognizing the fun in MCAT studying is kind of what allows you to like make your brain not turn into like mush and actually like use it and like enjoy it while you use it.
Yeah, no, there was a quote actually that I heard a long time ago that was about how growth mindset is prophylaxis against burnout. And it's something that I think about a lot, which is that having that joy and having that growth is really critical, not only to making improvements, but also allowing it to be, like you said, a dedicated time where you can really commit yourself to taking this test. And something that you said that was really striking to me is the fact that you don't really get many opportunities for dedicated learning the way you do when you're studying for the MCAT. The only other time you're going to get that is when you're studying for your board exams for medical school. And so I think there's a lot of growth and personal development that can often happen during this period too. That growth mindset that you said you developed during this period, I think it's something that carries you through a lot of medical school. And sometimes when people think about the practicality of the exam, it can be easy to say, oh, you're never going to use that stuff again, or, oh, you're never going to use those skills of reading a Carr's passage ever again. But the truth is that the challenge of studying for that exam, the challenge of taking it doesn't go away. And there is a difference in outcome for people who have done it and overcome that obstacle, because you'll get that obstacle kind of placed in front of you again.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to view it. And I always come back to how I felt after taking the MCAT. I always compare it to like my brain physiology changed. Or like, I mean, like obviously like it didn't, or like at least I don't know, hope it didn't. It could be crazy. But like I'm after taking the MCAT, I was not only like proud that I, you know, finished the MCAT, but I also just realized when I was starting my next semester of school that like what a joy it is to learn. And that sounds like so cringy. Like even like saying that I'm like, ew, gross. Like, but like it really is like you get to learn stuff that like you wouldn't have access to any other way.
Yeah.
And especially like you're learning stuff that is going to be directly applicable, or but depending on your degree, will probably be applicable in some facet to like your career, right?
Yeah.
And just as kind of you were mentioning, like it's not about the content of the MCAT, it's about learning how to like critically reason and like approach new challenges and situations and like large blocks of text and like figuring out what you have to do.
Yeah.
And like that's like patient encounters. That's, you know, you're going to be exposed to people who are new to you, right? Strangers, and you have to kind of like parse through it and figure out what's harming them, like figure out their perspectives. How do you apply what you know, your content, to their situation, which is the new passage, right? So like reminding yourself of the parallels, reminding yourself of the ways that you can enjoy the learning process and not take everything to heart, which like kind of ties back to
Yeah.
like the thing about like the score. Like, um, it's the mindset of like a score represents where you are now, but all of us are not in the now. We keep improving, right? We keep moving forward. And like that will happen to your score if you believe in yourself, if you try to change your mindset, if you try to find the joy in learning and not keep thinking about it as like a 3 out of 10 is like a 30%. So that means I'm failing or whatever. It's
Hmm.
70% of a way to it's a 70% that you're going to keep learning and improving. That's like another way to view it. Right.
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
yeah.
Wow, Ante, yeah, that was incredible. I think I'm going to take away what you said about the gift of learning for the future, because I feel like it's true. There is amount of gratitude. I know you had said that it sounds cringy and it can feel that way initially, but I do think that there is a level of like gratitude that I think needs to be had, right? And I know that you have done some intentional sleuthing through Reddit, Student Doctor Network, all these other places to investigate a little bit about the myths that people kind of encounter on the internet. What would you say is the biggest myth about improving your MCAT score that you want students to stop believing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the number one thing, at least that I see like numbers wise on like Reddit, SDN, and even like the first couple of classes whenever I start teaching a new course, is that you first do content and then you do practice, and
Mm,
knowing all of the content and doing all that, waiting not to do a practice test and practice questions, and then doing all the practice, that leads to improvement. That really
yeah.
does not. Like, that doesn't lead to as much improvement as people think it does. Like, even if you see like med school, like influencers who are like, I studied for like a month and a half and like, and did all the textbooks or whatever. And then I did a full length and my score rise 15 points. That's like one person out of like thousands of people who do that, and it doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
So like the biggest thing that we do at Blueprint, and I'm sure other places do it too, is the incorporation of space repetition practices, but really just making sure that you're actively doing practice questions while you're learning content.
Yeah.
It's really not helpful if you like read like 7 chapters straight of like acid-base chemistry, then like redox chemistry, and then like amino acid chemistry, and then just like
Right.
keep moving. And like 3 months later, you see a practice question on it. Obviously, you're gonna forget and not do well, right? Like
Right. Right.
that's not gonna work, right? Um, so practice should be within your content, and content should be within your practice, right? It's not like
Yeah.
one stage and then one stage. Um, and then on that note too, content also should not take more time than practice itself. And what I
Mm,
mean by that is that I always say to my students, you want to get through your modules, your content phase, or the phase where you're spending a bit more time on content, as quickly as possible. Because at the end of the day, you memorizing a detail about like, I don't know, like T tubules or like microtubules or whatever, that's great. But like until you actually get questions right on it and you actually see it in question form, I don't care. Like like you're gonna forget the detail, right? Like you memorize it
yeah.
and you're gonna forget, until you actually see practice questions on it and you see it worded differently. See how the AMC will test you on it, how Blueprint will test you on it, how like your instructors will ask you questions on it, to actually force you to recall it and like make those like neural networks that are wording it in different ways. That's what's really important, right? That's why like we always say like, and for people who are going to be in med school, the pass system is like very common, right? Like you see content first and then you do multiple passes in the form of practice or space repetition, like blurting, whatever, teaching others, other active recall techniques that you're kind of just forcing yourself to keep practicing the material, and seeing it in different ways. Because that's really what's going to lead to the highest retention, to the most like you improving your score, because you're seeing it in different mediums. And that's what the MCAT is, right?
Yes.
Like they're never gonna test. They're never gonna like ask you like, what is this one thing? They're gonna give you a passage on it that's very wordy and very annoying to read, and then ask you to apply it to like a figure or a table, right? The
Right.
application part is the hardest part, but it's not going to be hard if you do the practice as quick
Yeah.
as possible or as soon as possible, rather than just looking at the content of the table.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So it sounds like instead of that myth of having content and then practice, having them simultaneously and having practice inform content and vice versa seems to be really important. And I appreciate another thing that you're saying is the fact that what you're describing, the idea of spaced repetition, the idea of applying information, forming those neural networks, those are things that are based in learning science, like a field that has actually been developed in adult learners. Because people who are studying for the MCAT, unless you're a child prodigy, you're an adult. And the way that you learn as an adult is very different than when you're learning when you're in school. In school, you kind of apply, like learn all the knowledge and then do practice tasks. But as an adult, it's different. And the way that our brains work are different than when we're in, let's say, middle school and learning about science for the first time.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the fact that you're dispelling this myth with actual science. Okay. So now that we've talked about the big myths and a lot of the like typical things that we've seen students kind of encounter in terms of myths and mistakes, I want to transition a little bit into study strategies, the real practical component of today's discussion. And so the first thing I kind of want to discuss is changes or habits that you think have made the biggest impact when you try to improve by like 10 plus points. Because at this point, a lot of our listeners, they're kind of in this sense of, I'm at a 500, I need to get to a 520 or whatever score they want. And there's a huge jump that they're hoping to make. And I guess in your eyes, what would you say if you were to give like a single change or a single habit? What do you think makes the biggest impact in that direction?
Oh, wow. You're really pigeonholing me.
I know, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's such a valid question. I think the one thing that I would say is, or one thing I would suggest doing first is setting aside like 3 hours on like a weekend or like Saturday or Sunday and kind of like writing down everything you've been doing so far, like what you've been doing, how you've been doing it, like what you've been studying, how you've been studying, whatever techniques you use, and then ask yourself which of these techniques feel easy. Like when you're doing it, which of them feels like it's so good? I'm like having so much fun. Like I actively enjoy this process because it kind of reminds me of something I did in high school, or like it's just easy. And chances are that's not great. Chances are whatever feels easy, it's probably because you're not learning as much as you can or should in those moments. And like, it's such a sad reality. I'm a student as well. I fully resonate with all of the listeners. Like, I wish learning was easy. It's also not though. Learning is hard because you're like you're learning something new, right? Like, and something new that's also like complicated, like carbonic acid system like works and like how it shifts, all that kind of stuff. Like that's like a hard thing to learn. You have to like figure out like what are the implications to like oxygen, carbon dioxide respiration, saturation, all that kind of stuff. Like that's not supposed to be like easy when you do it. And if you notice that certain techniques are just really easy, then ask yourself how much you're taking away from it. When you do those techniques, do you feel like you really improved? Like if you were to do like a set of practice questions right after that technique, how would you do? And like, I'm not saying that you would always do poorly. Some students, like whatever, maybe it's an easy technique, but they actually feel like they benefit a lot from it. But chances are stuff that feels easy, like reading, highlighting, rewatching a video, watching a YouTube video, taking notes. It's easy because anyone can do it. And you're just absorbing what other people are telling you, right? That's like it's a simple thing to do. The more complex or complicated thing to do is teaching others, doing practice questions, rewording something in your own mind, blurting or like translating knowledge in your own words, and like sketching it out, mapping all the connections. If it seems intimidating, if it seems hard, it seems it's going to take time and like you're going to feel uncomfortable, you're probably doing something well, like good. You're probably making the right step to improving and actively challenging yourself. And again, it's probably not what you guys want to hear because it's something that you like have to be really honest with yourself and be realistic. It's like, hey, like, I know I keep taking like 2 hours worth of notes on like every module, like every YouTube video I watch. Ask yourself, like, are you coming back to those notes? Do you feel like you're actually improving from taking those notes? Or is it just something that you like the way you feel when you do it? And that's a really hard thing to ask yourself, to actively accept, like, I'm just doing this because it makes me feel good. I wish it was that simple, but like, if you want to improve by like 10 plus points, do the things that are hard. And if you don't know, ask for help. Like, ask your instructors, ask the MCAT coach, ask friends who maybe have done well on the MCAT or other similar, like harder or hard standardized testing. Keep challenging yourself and asking yourself, like, what's easy, and then kind of work backwards and see, are you actually learning a lot from those easy moments?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So it seems like that art of being reflective on what's working and what's not, and actively thinking about it as opposed to just passively prescribing yourself to a plan because it feels like the right thing to do, is the most high yield thing to do in terms of
Mhm.
studying. And those techniques can kind of range from what you've said, not only like videos and other things, but also thinking about active learning and kind of shifting your goals towards more active learning. So teaching someone from memory, mapping out a concept from memory, doing more practice questions. Is there anything else? I know that we talked about the most important one now, but are there any other honorable mentions, if you will, for other things that you think people should think about when they're considering high yield ways to improve their score?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I just said, like, it's also valuable to look at your strengths and not only your weaknesses. Not to like go back on that, but another thing is that you also have to look at your weaknesses. Like, you also have to be very honest with yourself and be like, hey, like, what are my areas of improvement? Like, go to your analytics page if you're a Blueprint student. Go to like whatever spreadsheet or like Google document you have open about like what questions you keep missing, what content pieces you don't know, and like
Yeah.
actively set aside time to improve it. And the reason why I'm saying actively is, like, I can't count the number of like students, like coaching, tutoring, instructing, where they have on their study plan, oh yeah, like I have to study acid-base chemistry, but then they don't do it because the activation energy to actually studying it is so high because it's so vague. It's like study acid-base chemistry. When you go to study your improvements, be as specific as possible when you're
Yeah.
doing your planning. And that's like the biggest, like smallest logistical thing that's the most helpful for students. Don't say like study acid-base chemistry. Be like, do 10 discrete questions from like this question pack or this Q bank, spend 15 minutes on it, then spend 15 minutes reviewing, have your Google Doc open. Like, actually write that in your study plan or on your agenda or whatever, to be very specific, just to kind of reduce that
Mm.
activation energy. And that kind of just goes hands in hand with being very intentional with your areas of weakness and
Yeah.
targeting them, not just one time, right? Don't just be like, oh, I did 10 discrete questions on acid-base chemistry, now I understand everything.
Yeah.
Like, you don't. Like, there's no way you do, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
then be like, oh, I actually didn't do that bad. Okay, maybe in like 4 days, let me do another discrete set, and maybe like on a whiteboard, go through all the equations I need to know and like a quick practice sample, or like watch a YouTube video to fill in what I don't know. And notice how like
Okay.
what I just said is very much like spaced repetition is intertwined, different study techniques is intertwined, and you're also actively improving your weaknesses. So it's a skill to develop, to like mix things and have like interleave practice and being honest with yourself, but like it really is that important. That's why I'm like really stressing it a lot.
No, I think it's important to. And I feel like a big takeaway from what you're saying also is that not only is it important to be intentional about your weaknesses, but it's important to track too. Like you mentioned, like the analytics page on Blueprint or his doc or his spreadsheet or whatever, however it is that you're choosing to track, it's important to track. And I will say, from the med student perspective, I was definitely tracking things for not only my MCAT, but I kind of created a system for the MCAT and use that same exact system for step 1 and for step 2, to just the idea of tracking all of the things that you're not doing as well in and creating an actionable plan, like you've said. So not just reviewing acid-base chemistry, but doing 10 specific questions on it, reviewing, making a flashcard on it so that you don't forget it. That type of process is really important to fill in the gaps as specifically as you possibly can. And I also will say, I think you touched on it really well, which is that duality of focusing on your weaknesses in terms of what you're doing with your time, but also highlighting your strengths to make sure that you're not just feeling bad about yourself the entire process. I do think that there is a little bit of a place for both.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's gonna suck if you do your whole time studying and you're constantly like, I'm horrible at these things. Like,
Yeah.
no, like you have to like celebrate the wins, and be like, oh, like I actually like really understand like the culture components of like this like social topic, and it's like really interesting, and I
Yeah.
have like these examples, and like now I actually understand this whole thing. Um, so yeah, definitely you want to do both. Don't just do one. But I would say if you're trying to improve your scores, like your weaknesses are lending to lower scores, like probably most likely. Um,
100%.
and I also want to state too, we've been like mentioning weaknesses in the context of content, like actual like aspects chemistry, but also like you should also be tracking weaknesses in terms of strategy and
Yeah.
pacing. So like don't forget about that, like the listeners, not you, Pooja. Like don't forget about those aspects of like, are you, when you're reviewing your practice, also are you reviewing like how you're highlighting your passages? Were your highlights helpful? Like did they actually help you understand things, or did you like never look at them once and you did it just to feel good about yourself? That's another thing to track, because maybe that's a weakness that you're just not realizing. Like, are you, when you like reread the passage or retroactively highlight, are you just skimming? Are you actively thinking about what stood out to you in the paragraph? That's like more so for cars, but stuff like that. Like you don't want to just do content. I usually like with my tutoring students, I have like a doc for content and I have a doc for strategy. And that strategy will also be like timing. Like, are you spending way too much time on the first question and then panicking for the rest? That's a thing you
Mm,
want to change, right? And probably even more so, strategy and pacing will probably prove or have more dividends than content. Um, because there's only so much that content can do. It's really how you
yeah.
approach the content, which is the strategy, which is the pacing, which is your mindset. That's going to kind of reinforce and work to improve your score and your skills.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate you mentioning that too, because I think something that I also wanted to touch on a little bit is the student or listener who is putting in several hours, several days a week, sort of like how you were doing in the beginning, but they're still not making improvements. And the big question at that point is ultimately, what's holding me back, right? What would you recommend to that person in terms of identifying like the source of how to even go about figuring out where what's holding them back? How can they figure that out?
I always think about it like you want to do something different.
Yeah.
Um, that's like essentially the theme of what my answer is going to be. If you are at this point and like you've tried what we just said and you're still not improving, like despite putting in the hours and all kind of stuff, um, trying something different is going to be the answer. Like, please don't just keep using the same study strategies or keep using the same techniques that you've been applying,
Yeah.
because it's not working for you, right? It's not working for you. And I know it sucks to hear because maybe they've worked for you in undergrad or college classes or your master's or high school or whatever. Try something different. And
Yes.
how to know that you're in that spot? Well, of course, like if your score is not improving, but also like you can even ask people advice on like what you think their issue is, which is like definitely a
Mm,
vulnerable spot, right? Like asking your friends, maybe who are also studying for the MCAT, like, I'm not improving. What do you think it is? Maybe even showing them like your spreadsheet or whatever, and seeing like what their insights are. I'm not saying their insights are going to be correct because maybe they have like similar issues or different issues, but chances are somebody will notice something that will get you to reflect, right? Um, and it doesn't have to be your friend. Maybe like email your instructor or coach, email like a mentor who you know did well in the MCAT. Ask me for their advice on like what they think your issue might be in terms of not improving. It's really just kind of like the ultimate answer is asking yourself different questions, doing something different, going to different people for advice. So it's not just a repetitive cycle. Really exciting for the MCAT is iterative. It's not meant to be like linear. If it's linear, then you're not doing something right.
yeah.
And you kind of have to keep improving and changing your strategies to
Yeah.
um, keep improving, right?
Right, absolutely. So it sounds like there are two sources of where to look. There's the actual documentation that we recommend people have. At Blueprint, I know we recommend a lessons learned journal where they have essentially a spreadsheet where they document the source of where they found the question, the lesson they specifically learned, the content area it was in, and the way they're going to be overcoming that obstacle that kind of led them to getting a
Mhm.
question wrong. But there's also external people. So whether it's an instructor or a coach or even just a friend who can look at a spreadsheet and be that external view for you and say, oh, you've been getting a lot of questions in, let's say, general chemistry wrong. What about general chemistry is troubling you? And being able to kind of work through what you're seeing from a very subjective lens and a more objective and outside perspective. Is there anything else that you think people can think about when it comes to overcoming that like obstacle and really breaking out of that plateau that they're experiencing?
I think another thing I would stress is something I like doing. If you're like a numbers person or like a very logic based person, like if you're listening to us and you're like, oh, gross, like put it into numbers, put it into a different sense. So what I mean by this is that sometimes I would actually like write down my like from your spreadsheet, write down all your content areas and maybe you're weaker in or okay in. Write down the different strategies that you've been learning in Blueprint or you've learned elsewhere, and actually, like on a number scale from 1 to 10, rate how well you think you're doing on each scale, and then subtract 2 from each category. And whatever is below 4 or 5, do that first and improve that content or skill. That's like a very like arbitrary like number based system for people who like really want something in front of them, hands on, like logic based, numbers based. Go with that to see if you really want to try something different that's not just like advice on study strategies or analytics or your lessons learned journal. I did that with one of my tutoring students and they found it really helpful to just like have a list of something that they like objectively on this scale, they're not doing well. And them rating themselves and also subtracting 2 because the 2 is like the reality indicator that I kind of added in, a reality adjustment. That can also help for people who like really need those like discrete numbers in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate how you've kind of given an example for people who want numbers and people who are like, I don't want numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fantastic. Okay. So now that we've talked about that pretty extensively, I want to circle back a little bit about what you said with regards to mindset, specifically growth mindset, and how it can really intertwine with the motivation that people have. Because like you've said, the MCAT is first and foremost a marathon, right? It is a couple months of an endeavor. It's funny, I actually have just started training like athletically. I'm not an athlete by any
Oh,
means.
okay.
But like I've been going to the gym more and there are these like coaches there. And the way that they talk about training is very similar to the way that people and we talk about the MCAT, which is that the motivation that you have is something that will really carry you forward for a really long time. And that it's all about making steady progress as opposed to just sprinting your way and doing a million questions a day, 7 days a week, and giving yourself that rest time. So with that being said, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about either your own personal journey or your students' journey about staying motivated, even when progress feels slow, or like you've said, when the journey isn't exactly linear.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have so many answers to this. I will start with
Let's dig into it.
yeah, I'll start with like what I like actionably did, like the small things that I did that are more extrinsic, and then I'll kind of
Yeah.
go into like lessons that took me a bit of time to just like learn and like internalize. But
Okay, great.
one thing that like I guess with the former aspect, one thing that I did that kept me motivated was to still do things that make me happy. That sounds so depressing, but like, it's hard. Like when you're studying for the MCAT, also if you're balancing like working part-time, full-time and research volunteering, it's very, I guess, common to feel like you're on a hamster wheel or like you're just, it's like repetitive scores are kind of staying the same. And you feel like maybe you're not improving. I would really stress on what I did was that I kept doing the things that made me happy. And so one of them that I always tell my students is like, I'm a huge TV show movie person. Like I've watched like over 2,000 TV shows and movies, probably. I think it's probably more than that if I were to count it all. It's like my biggest like hobby that I really enjoy doing, especially with the people who I love and like.
Yeah.
So one thing I always say to my students is like, when I was studying for the MCAT, I started watching Game of Thrones for the first time. And it felt so cathartic. It felt like I just intertwined something so small, like a TV show that's like an hour or two, like 2 hours a day. In my case, probably 3 hours because I watched it every like meal interval. But it was very much like I'm doing this like fun thing for me.
Yeah.
To like kind of, because it's like, something I enjoy. It's a hobby that I actively like really love. If you can call it a hobby, but it's like a thing that like I actively
I think it's a
really
hobby.
enjoy. Yeah, I mean, like, why not?
Yeah.
It's like a thing that I really enjoy doing, and I'm not sacrificing it for the MCAT, or it's not like I'm reducing it for the MCAT or like minimizing it. And also, as like a side note, it was so fun. Like I remember like literally watching the last episode like a week before my MCAT, and it was like so cathartic because anybody who watched Game of Thrones, like the last episode was like crazy. It's like so many like all the ties come, or like everything like comes to an end, and I was just like, now I'm ready. Like now I'm ready to write the MCAT because Game of Thrones ended, and like something. It doesn't have to be like that hobby ends or like that specific thing ends, but honestly, I would recommend it. Like it was such a unique thing. Like the Game of Thrones, I probably won't watch ever again because it was so intertwined with the MCAT. Or you know, I probably will, but like having something where something that you do that's a subset of a hobby that you do with the MCAT, like you've actively tied it to the MCAT or like your life chapter during studying for the MCAT, and you know it's going to end around the time you do your MCAT. I think like really, really helped me stay motivated because it felt like I had something to do always that wasn't just like studying, but also just like watching something I really enjoy. That's like on a small scale thing that I kind of like I kept doing. And I think all my students always like laugh when I say that, but it worked well for me, I guess.
No, that's legit. I hear that. I do.
Yeah. And then I think like another thing that I would stress to like all listeners is that I feel like everyone's MCAT journey is like so individual.
Yeah.
But I also want to say it's not. Like and what do I mean by that is that the MCAT is a chapter in your life, but it's also a chapter in a lot of people's lives. And I think it's really like common or very easy to feel like whatever you're going through is your own issues and your own struggles, and it's very individual. And like if you're failing, like you're only failing, and like it's all because it's your fault, and like you have to do something different. And it's, you know, it's like a product of like what's not going well for you or whatever. But I'd also want to stress that like the MCAT is also like a collective experience. So many pre-medical students and like others who also enter medicine, like have to do the MCAT. It's a chapter. It does not define the physician you become. And I think just like trying to internalize that what you're going through is common. Try to find people that are also studying so you can like vent to and like stay motivated. That's not just like a crushing experience that you're solo experiencing. And I think there's also a value in that. Finding people who are writing the MCAT that are not like your parents or like your friends who are not reading it because they might not understand. Just to talk about how the commonalities of like what you're experiencing, and really just to recognize that it's just one challenge on the path that you've already shown you're capable of walking, which is kind of what Pooja was mentioning, that like you've already done so much of like the like pre-med checklist, you want to call it like that. The MCAT is not like a only you thing. Feeling stuck doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. You're allowed to struggle. Basically, everyone struggles with the MCAT at some point. If they say they don't, they're lying. If I'm being so honest, right? Like I've struggled. I scored well. I teach it now and I coach it now. But like I had like 2 plateaus. Like it's not like I was like a perfect exponential growth, right? Like
yeah, I struggled too.
Yeah, exactly. You're okay to not do well or to retake it or whatever. And just accepting that. I think accepting that And of course, doing those small actionable things like watching Game of Thrones while you study will like work to kind of like incorporate that mindset that we kind of mentioned earlier in the episode about knowing where to improve is the biggest struggle of the MCAT, and viewing
Yeah.
it as an opportunity to grow, not as like a thing that's going to keep me from like succeeding or like not being a good doctor. I think that's where kind of like the strength lies in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. That is so profound. I
Thank you.
think no, it's true. And I think that hopefully people who are listening can kind of take away a couple of things, right? That although this test can be really, it can feel really insurmountable, other people have done it, and therefore there is no reason for you to believe that you cannot also.
Yes. Yeah.
But also realizing that as you're kind of going through it, it's sort of a rite of passage in a way, right? And so it's a matter of not if you get through, but how, and
Mm.
maximizing the things that give you joy as you're going through it are really important. And I also want to echo what you said about, finding something that a hobby. I didn't know that Game of Thrones ended right around the time you took your test. That's awesome.
Oh, not like the actual
Legendary.
show, but when I watched it, when I streamed it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay. Wait,
yeah,
wait. So
yeah.
did you watch the entire show or did you like watch from a certain season onwards?
No, I watched season 1 to 8 in 3.5 months because I studied for 3.5 months, and so yeah, I watched it
Wow.
all, which really is not. That's actually slow for me. I can go through shows much faster, but
Oh,
like,
I believe it. Yeah.
but like I had to pace myself because I was like only 2 episodes a day. Like I have to be, like I have to actually like study still. But it's something that like, having that like positive outlet was meant a lot for me.
Wonderful. So I think another follow-up question I have for you about the mindset, and I know that you said that you had made a shift because you were a blueprint student yourself, and you kind of transitioned from studying 7 days a week to giving yourself rest days. What would you say is the mindset shift that helped you turn studying from something that was really stressful to something that felt more sustainable?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I mentioned this like earlier, but
Yeah.
I studied for about like 6 weeks, 7 days, very much like very pre-med of like I have to know everything, and like flashcards and like going to class and like modules, taking notes, like just being that student that like did everything by the book. And when I was like very burned out, I was so tired of like I felt like I wasn't making any change because I really wasn't. I wasn't really learning actively, or wasn't doing what I thought I could be doing or should be doing. I actually still went to class though, and when I went to class, one of my instructors, shout out Ian, um, was very much reinforced the notion that like everyone has heard, the MCAT is a mile wide and an inch deep. Right? The MCAT is a mile wide and an inch deep. It's a very common saying. That basically just means there's so much stuff, but the stuff you need to know is not that deep. You're not like required to memorize like every single electron flow path, right? In like organic chemistry. The
Yeah.
problem though is that people don't internalize that they like hear it. I didn't internalize. They hear it and it's like, okay, cool, bro. Like, let's keep going. Like, let me do another flashcard set on Anki or whatever. But what I want to like really stress is that it's too much to do both at the same time. You can't try to learn so many different topics, which is the mile wide, and then also try to go past the inch deep and like also learn like
Mm,
all the electron flows and like, or like every single detail of like each metabolic pathway. Like that's it's way too much. You're gonna get burned out, as did I. And B, you don't need to do that. Like the MCAT is not more than an inch deep and it's not more than a mile wide. So you
mm.
trying to do it just because your pre-med self would do it, or because like you're trying to prove something to yourself, or like you're like, I have to do it because like it's technically a listed topic on the AMC course outline or on the MCAT content outline. So technically I might get a question on it.
Yeah.
Like that's not how smart test takers think. The test is about critical reasoning and problem solving. And problem solving is not knowing every detail. It's knowing how to approach something you don't know or are not the most familiar with and still get it right, which is like why like
Mm.
we scored well, right? So what I always say is that you really have to shift from I must master everything to I'm just building understanding layer by layer.
Right.
So that's kind of like you pick one, you do either a mile wide or an inch deep. Don't go more than an inch deep. And you're like, okay, like 0.3 of an inch. So like you're going to know the 10 steps like a calls this. And then once you're done that, then you're going to add on the enzymes at each step and the rate limiting steps. Then once you're done that, you're probably approaching the inch deep. And now you're going to be like, maybe what are the structures of them? But that's like lower yield, right? And recognizing that's probably like not worth my time, or it's probably approaching past that inch deep, is where you just then keep progressing to the rest of the mile and keep moving, right? Keep moving down the line rather than digging in the line. And I think I just really want to stress that you can't do both at the same time. I tried, a lot of students try, because it's like how you study in pre-med. The MCAT is too big, right? It's like you're like doing like basically all of like high school and first and second year chem, physics, psych, soc, bio, and biochem. Like that's way too much. You can't do it.
Yeah.
You have to pick your battles, and that battle is start with an overview, a general understanding of concepts, then slowly work more and work smart. You're not doing everything all at once. You're not doing all the miles and then also more than an inch deep, because it just won't work. It's not sustainable, and it's also so stressful.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I feel like mile wide and inch deep is something that people say all the time, but it's like, what does that even mean? So I appreciate you being more granular and practical about that. I guess I wonder, for people who are thinking about how to take what you just said, right? Being able to sift through what's important, what's not important. How do you recommend people go about figuring out, okay, what exactly is that inch deep, or what exactly is that mile wide for a given topic? So let's say they're trying to go over, I don't know, my favorite topic to bring up in these discussions, because I actually still don't remember all the equations to this day, like the kinematics equations, for example. I promise I knew it when I took the test, but now as like a fourth year student, I'm like, I don't know. But anyways, so I guess like for topics like that, how can they identify, okay, what exactly is the scope of information I need to know? What do you recommend for them?
Mm-hmm. That's a bad example.
So fair.
Just because you need to know all four of the equations for or technically there's five, but you need to know all four. So
you're so right. And that's literally it.
I'm like, you know what, Pooja? You just found the exception. Like, you just basically broke down my entire philosophy.
That's awkward.
Yeah, I'll give another example. I'm going to go back to metabolism because I see students a lot struggle with it. What's important about metabolism? When you're trying to figure that out, do practice questions. Like, I know it's like a very like simple thing to do, but do practice questions, do passages and discretes, and just see how they ask you about it, and you'll get the gist. But I'll also tell you that generally when you're approaching complex topics like that, what I recommend is knowing where you're starting and where you're ending. And it's kind of, I guess, easier to understand this in terms of biochem, because it's like you're starting at glucose, you're ending at creating ATP at large amounts in the mitochondria, and that ATP is used throughout the body. Just know where you're starting and ending, and then you kind of keep getting a bit deeper and deeper, like layer by layer, right? And then you know the intermediates, right? Like you're going from glucose to pyruvate to acetyl-CoA, right? And then you keep going. Then you form like the steps of the citric acid cycle. I think the biggest thing that I just don't want people to do is, instead of looking at like what is glucose turned into and why is that important, they're like, glucose goes into glucose 6-phosphate via hexokinase, then is converted to X, Y, and Z. Like going at the very first step of the glycolysis and doing that, and like going through like all, I don't know how they add up to, like I think like do the math quickly, 23 steps of like glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, Krebs cycle, the 4 complexes of the ETC. That's so stressful. It's so much content to do like every single granular aspect.
Yeah.
Keep it like zoom out, scope out. Think about also like, how would you teach it? As a professor, how would you teach it? You're probably not going to teach it to your students like, boom, hexokinase does this, glucose, phosphate. You're probably going to be like, okay, let's step back. Glucose goes into pyruvate. Why is that important? Where does the pyruvate go? Right? Like zooming out, thinking about how you would even teach this to students or teach it to your friends. That's also another way to be helpful.
Yeah.
And then for people who like want to make connections to content, some people find that very helpful, like connecting to why it's important. Think about connections to other content, right? Like, okay, glucose, pyruvate, ATP. Think about maybe like how insulin is important or how glucagon is important. Think about like, the connection to diabetes, and maybe like that kind of makes it click for you a bit more. I guess trying to apply that to whatever you learn, like maybe it's even like redox reactions. Like, okay, zoom out. What is a reduction? What is an oxidation? Okay, you know that. What would be an example of a reaction, and look it up.
Yeah.
Okay, you know that. What would be like an equation that would represent a redox reaction? Where can I see it? Where did I see it before? Oh, I saw it in ATP because that's what the complex is in the ETC work, right? Trying to make those connections, zooming out, are probably my two biggest tips when trying to figure out what's high yield. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, and when I took my MCAT, there were questions that were like detail oriented, like more granular, but there was like 4 to 7 per section or whatever. I can't remember. But I didn't really worry about those because either I knew it or I didn't, but I could control the ones that, I remember generally what the steps are of this pathway, and I know what the passage gives me, and let me like make sense of it and then get the question correct.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think something that is clear from what you're saying is that it's not only zooming out and being able to teach it, but also thinking about what questions are even asking about a particular subject, like leaning into how it's presented in practice questions to kind of inform what is or is not an important detail is super helpful as well. Okay. Amazing. That was really great. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Ante. So before we wrap this up, I feel like a piece of advice that you gave that I definitely think is an important takeaway, not only for our learners, but also just like for me as I continue taking exams and preparing for board exams and licensing exams in my future, is realizing that all of these exams are just a step and they're not representative of your own journey and your own trajectory, that you're more than just a number.
Yeah.
And letting that remove some of the pressure that you're associating with the test itself, right? If you approach every practice exam like it is the make or break for the rest of your life, that is going to create way more stress than if you realize in the moment that it's just a part of your journey and that it is the beginning or the middle rather than the end all be all, I think is just really valuable. So I appreciate you for bringing that to this episode. What is a piece of advice that you would give to someone who's currently stuck at a certain number? Let's say it's a 500 score and they're losing hope, or they are worried about whether or not they're going to be able to overcome the plateau they're in right now.
Yeah, that's a good question. I always come back to like one quote that I was given, and then it kind of like has like 3 components to it. But the first thing I would say, I'm going to say it very powerfully to like really get the point across. Stop trying to raise your score and start trying to fix your patterns. Whoa, mind blown. What? So stop trying to raise your score and start trying to fix your patterns. A 500 plateau, or whatever score plateau it is, almost always comes from a few consistent fixable habits, not from a lack of ability. Don't get that stuck in your head. Like, I'm at this plateau, this means it's my future. It's not a lack of your ability. It's just certain habits are not serving you as they once did, right? Once you identify and correct the patterns that are holding you back, the score follows naturally. And some things that I just want to like highlight from what we talked about today was that, like, number 1, shift focused from more studying to targeted repair or targeted review. That's basically just quality over quantity in simpler terms. Instead of just doing like another 40 practice set or another full length, hoping for like a miracle bump, break down the why behind what you're missing, right? Are you misreading passages when you're rushed? Are you spending too much time on the first question or passage? Are you losing points to traps? Are you running out of time in cars? Are you weak on a certain like biochem topic? Are you confident in answers that are wrong? Why are you confident in answers that are wrong? Fixing like even one root pattern can move a score like 500 to like 505, like very fast, very surprisingly fast. And like a second component of that is And I mentioned this earlier, your score doesn't reflect potential. It just reflects strategy. And that really just means like a 500 isn't a ceiling. And I know some people like think it is. It really isn't.
Yeah.
Even if people tell you it is or whatever, that would be so rude if they told you it's a ceiling. But it's a sign that you're doing a lot of things right? Like you're at 50th percentile, so you're doing things, you know, stuff, and you're doing things right. But doing a few things consistently suboptimally, like some things you're just not doing the best you can do. And this kind of brings in the growth mindset that some of you, like, who maybe like more glass half empty, which I for sure am too, you hear that and you're like, that sucks. Like 50%, whatever. Like, you have to train your brain to be like, no, that's actually great news, because guess what? Strategy is fixable. Like, your score is fixable. Like, even though it's numbers, like you can fix it, you can change it, right? By identifying those patterns. And lastly, I guess kind of like ending off on like a more positive or motivational note, plateaus feel like the end, but they're usually just the midpoint. And I'm a case example. I actually started out at 500, my diagnostic, and then I went to 508, and I stayed at 508 for like 3 full-length exams. And then I went to 512, 515. I stayed there for 4 exams or 3 exams. And then I went to 520 and around there and kept scoring there. So at those moments, yes, it was hard to be like, this is the end. I'm just going to score this on the test. But literally it was my midpoint. I guess it was like 2 of my midpoints. Most students who end up scoring 510, 515 plus spend a chunk of time around a plateau, around 500, around 507, around 510, 513, whatever. It's the part where your brain is like reorganizing what you've learned. You're not failing, like you're just consolidating. You're just consolidating what you've learned. And I always think back to like an analogy I give sometimes when I teach, where it's like when you're writing the MCAT, I think of like 3 runners, and there's a runner that represents content. There's a runner that represents like your strategy, and there's a runner that represents like your mindset and your pacing. And plateaus are just the moments where your runners are out of sync, where they're just not running at the pace where they all can catch up to each other and keep up together. They're just out of sync, right? They're just not working together because maybe your content's behind on something or ahead of something, but your strategy is not there, or your pacing is too slow, too fast, or whatever. They're not at the same kind of like wavelength, the same speed. That's what a plateau is. But guess what? Those runners are not done. They're at a midpoint, and they're not at the end of the race yet, right? So really keeping in mind, there's more to it than the midpoint and the plateau that you're currently on. There's more to you than your score. And that's what really I want to stress and hone in. And I'll kind of like reiterate, stop trying to raise your score and start trying to fix your patterns.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for walking through all of that. I also especially appreciate the running analogy. I love a good analogy. I'm a sucker for a good analogy.
Who doesn't? Yeah.
But I think that's wonderful, because I will say I also experienced plateaus like that. Like, I was stuck at the same score for several exams and I didn't know what to do, and then it happened again and I was like, oh, well, I guess this is it. But you're right. It is just consolidating. It is just our brains kind of thinking about all the information. Also, because I think something that's important to realize too is that the test is a random assortment of information. And once you cover enough, then it will be such that there will be less and less information that surprises you, right? And it kind of goes with what you were saying earlier about targeting weaknesses and doing as much as possible. The goal is to make it so that you're not surprised on test day, but it takes time to do that. And some of these plateaus might happen because the things that you're doing well in, you're crushing. And then there's a surprise passage where it asks you about something that you weren't as confident in. And then your brain was like, ruh-roh, what do I do now? And that's okay, because that's just a time where you're not going to be surprised again. Okay, so I guess to wrap things up, if listeners were to remember one thing from today's conversation, what do you think it should be? And I know I'm putting you on the spot again with the one thing, but we'd love to know what you think.
Yeah, I guess it kind of comes back to that like quote of like, don't improve your score, start fixing your patterns, but kind of connecting that there's more to you and your studying than the score, right?
Yeah.
It's not indicative of your capabilities or overall level or whatever. It really isn't. It's just a midpoint. Rather, it represents where you can improve in a certain subset of like content, question, strategy, or pacing. And really try to accept that. Like, I know it's a hard thing to do. And I know a lot of people like see the score and they're immediately demotivated, and they think it's like the end. It's really not. Like, I've like taught, I think, more than like 200 students now, and coached and tutored probably like over 50. Like, I know, I see all the time that's like how people feel, but I also see that students improve, and they improve, and they recognize, like, whenever I talk to them after they got their score, they're like, oh yeah, that was crazy that I thought that. Like, they're always like, that was so weird that I thought that. Like, oh, like, whatever, like, at least it didn't happen. But like, don't brush it off. Like, internalize that, like, whenever you don't succeed, that's not a predictive measure. Like, you're not going to succeed. You're just going to keep improving. And there's more to you than just that one moment of failure, even though it's not failure, but you're going to classify it as such.
Yeah.
That's essentially like a testament to like that growth mindset, and to just accepting that like we're all humans, we're all trying to improve, and we'll have to improve for MCAT stuff and med school stuff and grad school stuff and all that kind of stuff. But that's just like that. Such is life.
Yeah. It's a life we've chosen.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Ante, for chatting with me today. And thank you to our listeners who stuck around to the very end. We still have 3 more episodes left on this first season of Pursuit of Practice. So please stay tuned for more MCAT prep, med school insights from our amazing guests. And we look forward to seeing, well, I guess I won't really be seeing you, but I look forward to you seeing and listening to me and our guests in our next episode. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or follow Pursuit of Practice on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And remember, Blueprint's MCAT resources are always here to help you prep smarter and feel confident on test day. Visit blueprintprep.com/MCAT for more information and free MCAT prep. See you next time.